Hello everyone, my name is Clay Risenhoover. I am the instructor for the ISACA North Texas 2018 Spring Seminar, which is a CISSP certification review course or boot camp. The purpose of this video today is to answer a few questions that I've had from prospective students for this course. So specifically, I want to talk to you about the books that I have recommended for the course, which ones you should buy and how you should use them. I want to discuss the way that we'll handle practice questions and review questions for the course. And then I want to cover some updates to the exam that will be happening either around the time that we do the course or that will have already taken place by that time. So let's start by talking about the books. If you look at the course website at ISACANTX.org, what you find is that we have recommended 3 different textbooks or 3 different study guides for the students to use for this course. What I would like to do is just describe each of the 3 to you and tell you how I anticipate that you will use them as you are studying for the CISSP certification. So the first one is the official guide from ISC². You can see here it's a very large book, over 1,300 pages. This is the authoritative full coverage of the CISSP CBK for prospective exam takers. This is going to be a very important book for you as you're preparing for the certification then, because this really is the official description of the common body of knowledge from ISC². But it's 1,300 pages. I don't really expect that most students will sit down and read this book cover to cover. Instead, we are going to use this particular book as the outline for the course. In other words, I am going to follow the same general outline in my presentations as the authors followed in the official study guide. That way, if you're a student and you have difficulty with one of the topics that we're talking about in class, you can pretty easily find the official ISC² coverage of that topic in the book. So I recommend that you buy this one to use as a reference, but not really that you sit down and try to read this book cover to cover. The Sean Harris guide is going to be very similar in its usage then. If you talk to virtually anyone who has passed the CISSP exam over the past several years, you'll find that they probably use some of Sean Harris's material in their study. She is the queen, or she was the queen, of CISSP preparation. Since her death, McGraw-Hill has continued publication of the guides with her name on them and with a new editor. This book is an encyclopedia of everything that you need to know for the CISSP, and I expect you to use it that way. So again, you find a topic that you're not super comfortable with. Maybe you want to learn more about how asymmetric encryption algorithms work. Look it up in this book. You're going to find an article that reads almost like an encyclopedia article that will help you with that specific topic. So I recommend this book for students who want to be able to learn more about individual topics that we may uncover as we're going through the class. If you want to sit down and read a study guide, I really recommend this one. The Cingress CISSP Study Guide. You're looking for the 3rd edition, which is the current one. Much smaller book than the other 2 at only 622 pages. Very readable, very good tips from experienced authors on not only how to understand the concepts, but how to think about them for the exam, and how to learn to think the way that ISC² wants you to think as you're taking the exam. Those 3 books together, the official guide, the Sean Harris guide, and the Cingress guide, will cost around $150 new, so they average about $50 a piece. I recommend that you buy, or that you at least make available to yourself, all 3 of the books and use them in the way that we've already discussed. This book you don't need to buy. In fact, I'm going to buy it for you as part of your course materials, so every student will get a copy of this practice exams book. Over 1,000 questions covering all 8 of the CBK domains. We're going to use them in class as review questions, and there may even be a bit of homework where I ask you to do some at night and we discuss them the next morning to reinforce the topics that we discussed in class the day before. But the reason that I chose this particular set of practice questions for you is that it includes some software that lets you simulate an exam. Now, it is Windows-only software. If you're a Linux or a Mac OS user, you need to get access to a Windows machine to be able to take these practice tests. There's another limitation of the software, and that is that it's only multiple choice. So what ISC² calls their innovative question types, which means drag and drop questions or hotspot questions, won't show up on the simulated exam that you do with this software. But the disk that comes with the book does do an HTML5 example of some of these innovative questions where you can see how to use a drag and drop. How do I actually participate in a hotspot question? That's going to help you understand what these look like so that you won't be surprised when the actual exam day comes. So my ultimate goal for this book is that students will do do-it-yourself practice exams to understand exactly how ready they are to take the real exam. Now, speaking of the real exam, there have been a few changes that are going to be made in April of 2018. This is nothing like the changes that we saw back in 2015, which was a large rearrangement of the common body of knowledge. The number of domains changed, what was covered in each domain changed, the sorts of topics on the exam really changed a lot back in 2015. The changes that I have seen slated for 2018 are going to be much easier for us as students to absorb. They renamed one of the domains. They added an acronym to another domain name. They barely changed the weightings on the exam of some of those domains, and I'll show you that on a chart coming up. And then they consolidated some of the information into individual domains. So I list on the slide here cryptography. They've done similar things with cloud computing to make it a little bit easier for the student to absorb the information. So let's take a look at the 2015 version and the 2018 version of the Common Body of Knowledge. On the right-hand side, I've highlighted in red for you the major changes that were made this year. So in the far right column, you see that a few of the percentages have changed. Security and risk management dropped from 16% of the exam to 15%. Security architecture got the words "and engineering" added to the end of it and got an extra % on the exam. Communications and network security, they changed the weighting from 12 to 14%. Identity and access management is still weighted the same, but they added the acronym to the end of the domain name. And then you can see some small changes were made to security assessment and testing and security operations as far as their weight on the exam goes. The bigger thing, I think, for most of my students will be this. As of the end of 2017, if you take the CISSP exam in English, you are now taking what is known as a computerized adaptive test instead of what they used to call the linear format. If you take it in any language other than English, then it will still be linear. I'm going to cover what both of those mean then in this video. So, taken from the CISSP website here, we can see the old linear format, which will still be used for languages other than English currently. 6 hours, 250 questions, which were a combination of multiple choice and what they call the innovative questions, drag and drop and hotspot style questions. Passing grade of 700 out of 1,000 scaled points. Now, after December 2017, they're using computerized adaptive testing, which means that your exam time is cut in half from 6 hours to 3, and the number of questions should on average be cut in half, but you can see here that there is an actual possible range of 100 to as many as 150 questions. The question format is the same, the passing grade is exactly the same. The only real difference is the way that the exam is offered. So let's take a look at why ISC² made this change, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it actually means for people taking the exam. So I've taken a look at the frequently asked questions here for computer adaptive testing, and these are ISC²'s reasons for making the change. What I want to tell you about it is this. Computer adaptive testing is exactly as accurate as the older linear format, but it doesn't expose the test taker to as many questions. So in that fourth bullet here, where ISC² says that this enhances exam security, what they mean by that is they don't have to show you as many of their proprietary exam questions in order to decide whether you're actually qualified for the certification or not. That, I think, is the major reason that they made the change. The secondary benefit would be, well, shorter test sessions means that it's easier for people to schedule exams, because scheduling a 6-hour block for an exam really cuts down on the number of exam slots that are available in a day at a testing center. So let's talk a little bit about how computerized adaptive testing works. As I've worked with students over the years, some of them are a little bit scared of this sort of testing. And the thing I would like to tell you as an instructor who has taken dozens of computerized adaptive tests is there's nothing to worry about. They score you exactly the way that the linear exam would. So imagine that you're a math teacher and you're trying to evaluate a new math student who has just enrolled in your class. You want to find out what their level of skill with math is. You may do something like what we've got on the slide here. Ask them, how much is 3 plus 2? And if they're able to answer that accurately, then what's 12 times 13? And if they can answer that, then take the square root of a number for me, or solve this algebra equation for x, or tell me what the integral of this is. And at some point, you are going to hit a place where the student is answering about half of the questions correctly and missing about half of them. When you get to that point as an instructor, then you know that you have found that student's level of expertise with mathematics. That is exactly what is going on with computer adaptive testing. The goal is to get to the point where the testing engine understands the level of competency of the student who's being tested, and then don't ask any more questions than you need to get to that point. So let's talk about what that really boils down to then for you as a student. Passing score is still exactly the same. You need to score 700 scaled points out of 1,000. It does mean, though, that you have a shorter exam window, which might mean that you need to manage your time a little bit differently. In a worst case scenario, which would be 150 questions over the 3 hours, you have slightly less time to answer each question than you would have on the old linear format exam. It also means that your time management's a little bit more complicated because you don't know ahead of time how many questions you're going to receive. So you need to plan for the worst case. Assume that you're going to get 150 questions on your exam. Breaks haven't changed from the old exam. The clock starts running when you begin the exam. You can take as many breaks as you want for as long as you want, but they are still counted as part of that 3-hour time schedule, just like they were on the old 6-hour exam. The biggest change for people who are going to be taking this exam is that you no longer have the ability to review your prior questions. That kind of makes sense if you think about how adaptive testing works. We can't allow you to change previous answers because they influence the questions that you're receiving now. But that means you may need to rethink some of your test-taking strategy. You can no longer just mark a question for review and, for instance, hope that a future question will help you understand the correct answer to it. You now will have to answer each question and then move on without the ability to review it. That means you need to be careful about the amount of time that you spend on an individual question. Take long enough to make sure that you've developed the correct answer, but don't spend 20 minutes on an individual question because, well, that's just going to make it really difficult for you to finish the exam. So time management may become a little bit more of an issue for you as you're taking these new adaptive exams. Now, if you have any questions about the class, about the way that we're going to teach it, about the books, or about how this new computer adaptive testing works, feel free to send me an email. My email address is clay@risenhooverconsulting.com. I would ask that you put CISSP in the subject line, or ISACA, or something to let me know why I should know who you are. That way, as I'm cleaning out my spam traps, it'll make it much easier for me to find any emails from any prospective students. I hope to see you at the class in April, and please do feel free to drop me a line if you have any questions at all about any of this material. Thank you.